One characteristic about the nature of the construct that we live in is its dualistic nature, or really the fact that two poles exist and they're constantly going back and forth. Easy way to look at that is just night and day, sun and moon, male and female, hot and cold, light and dark. The list just goes on and on and on and on. So what we're going to do now is take a look at how these cycles, how these polarities influence our health in our body, and also how this translates out to the cosmos at large. And look at the rhythmic nature of reality, or really what music and sound can teach us about our personal health, our personal vibration or self or state of being, and how that relates and how it is true across many different levels of existence and why that is the case. So when it comes to the micro scale, the more, I guess, human-centered scale or in our body, we have all had the sense of having a vibe about something, have a feeling about something, or being in the flow. And this is all basically this deep inner sense that comes from our body that's not really based in thought or logic. In the same way, music is a similar process. You know, we can hear a certain combination of tones and sounds that just make us feel really good. There's a certain combination of tones and sounds that just make us feel really bad. For example, the minor third. That's used a lot in an alarm clock because that is something that we just don't like it. We want to get rid of it as soon as possible. You know, if they were going to do like a major third or like a major seventh, something like that, or you know, something that's really soothing and pretty chill and low key, people will be less likely to get out of bed because they're just like, that's not a bad sound. Sure, the repetitiveness and the lack of change would be annoying, but even in that example, we can see another illustration. Because really life is about what? Cycles, which implies movement, rhythms, which implies movement. You know, from day to night, light to dark, sun and moon. These are rhythms, these are movements, these are pulsations. So just in the same way as you hear your alarm clock and it's just hitting the same interval over and over and over and over, you hate that. The body just doesn't like it. But if it was a different combination, or there was moving intervals and different intervals arranged in a certain way that was harmonious, you'd like it. You probably would say, that's cool, I can sleep through that, it's not too bad. Boom, back to sleep. That same principle, that same illustration applies to the health of the body and to the different cycles and states through the cosmos at large. Because in the same way that music is about pulsation and rhythm and contextuality and harmony, our function of our organs or the health of our body is the same thing. Each one of our organs is pulsating and pumping at a rhythm. And then on a larger scale, we have the rhythm of our breath and its harmonic relationship with our heart. And when these things are in harmony together, we feel good, we feel healthy, we feel grounded, we feel rooted, we feel centered. But when they start, our heartbeat gets erratic and our breathing gets shallow and they get out of harmony or they get in dissonance, what happens? We don't feel good. Stress hormones kick on, our adrenals kick on, our organs start to tighten up, everything in the body tightens up and clenches, and we just don't feel good. Well, that's a natural principle that's based in reality. It's based in the natural world. And so if our organs are pulsating all the time, if there's a rhythm to our organs, that is actually the foundational basis for most indigenous or old school methods of healing and transformation. Could be Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or Tibetan medicine, or the myriad of different things that use pulse diagnosis to measure the state of a person. Because in the same way that music has perhaps a certain scale that is harmonious, there's a certain frequency or spectrum of pulsation in the body that is harmonious as well. And there's a certain spectrum that is disharmonious or dissonant and is implicit of stagnation or blockage somewhere. So that's what people are feeling and listening to, and really they can judge the health of you on many different levels through just, reading the pulse at different places in the body, feeling the pulsation, feeling the rhythm, feeling the harmony, and feeling the harmony between all the different organ systems in the body, which is really equates together like a frequency, like a song, like a vibration. And we can hear a song or a symphony or song or vibration, and it might feel really good and be harmonious. We might hear others and it might be disharmonious. So much in the same way, really our body is musical in that way. It is going through cycles, it is going through rhythms. Some sound really good and harmonious, others not. So that same principle is true at a larger level. So we've already seen the kind of musical nature of our body and why that is true and how that works. So on the same token, we can start to look at another way of seeing a polarity. So we talked about how the nature of this construct is really, duality. It's really based on polarity. So that really starts with this idea of the Tai Chi, or the yin-yang symbol, which is, yang and yin. Yin and yang, pretty simple. And really what that is positive and negative, plus and minus. Now I apologize if these scribblings over here don't show up quite as well. Basically all it is just the 8 trigrams of the I Ching that are sketched out. But really what we have here is a yin line and a yang line, a broken and a solid. We have positive and negative, which is really showing that whoever came up with all of this stuff thousands and thousands of years ago perceived these things about reality and knew them and wrote them down and mapped them out and said, hey, maybe we can harmonize with these things. Maybe we can get into the same octave or the same frequency and achieve better results. So out of this, we have the great Tai Chi, which separates into positive and negative and positive and yin and yang, which then that can combine to form the 8 trigrams, which then the 8 trigrams can combine to form the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which is a big circle, which is really kind of an equivalent to the periodic table of elements, meaning modern science has really measured that physical reality is made up of a certain spectrum of elements. And everything that exists is a combination of different elements. In the same way, we can look at the existential reality or the energetic reality that underlies life and see that it too can be made up of different combinations of yin and yang, different combinations of trigrams, which then become hexagrams. So different combinations of really the same underlying duality, which really, it's kind of like in the Matrix where Neo sees in code and sees like, oh, this is really what's behind the scenes. When we start to understand this rhythm and the cyclical nature and this pulsation, this musical nature, understand the polarity and the duality of the yin and yang, expansion, contraction, plus and minus, positive and negative, then we too can maybe become like Neo and start to see, whoa, this situation is really not just the mental interpretation that I'm making up based on my conditioning. It's really just this deeper level of this dynamic, energetic process, or this dynamic, natural process that is playing out in front of me. And if we can sort of peel back the curtain and see the code, see the real dynamic, then we may be able to respond more accordingly or more appropriately, whether that's for our own life or in the lives of others or working with other people. So all of this leads and translates to this line here, which we can see is basically a graph of up and down, up and down, up and down. Now, obviously you can imagine what it would be like if we were to stretch that out over a long period of time. Then it would be more of a really slow and gradual up and a slow and gradual down. And it would probably occur at such a rate that maybe our conscious mind wouldn't even perceive it. Perhaps our life is the same way. Our life perhaps goes in cycles. We're born and we grow and we're going up on this certain wave, and then at a certain point, the wave starts to tip back down and we start to edge our way back towards the death of the physical body. But the thing is, oftentimes we're not even aware of it. Perhaps every single month we have different personal, spiritual, sexual cycles or emotional cycles, but perhaps we're not even aware of it. Now obviously women may have an advantage over men in this instance because women, for obvious reasons, are oftentimes more attuned to the cyclical nature of their bodies and being more in tune with their bodies. And perhaps that's just more of the nature of the feminine, whereas men are just all about go, 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 yang all the time, do this, expand. We don't really take time to nourish and cultivate yin, nourish and cultivate the feminine balancing counterpoint to then be able to sit back, relax, and observe. So if we can eventually get to that point and observe the cycles, we start to notice, wow, personal cycles, spiritual cycles, sexual cycles, emotional cycles. And we start to perhaps, through understanding where we are and what the code is, or what the vibration is, or what the rhythm is, or what the pulsation is, or what the vibe is, maybe understand and get a better picture for where we are. So for example, a friend of mine told me a story about a person that they were working with who went to the doctor. And this person went to the doctor during the peak of liver season. Went in for normal tests, got all these tests done. Doctors came back and said, wow, cholesterol's up, your blood pressure's up, your indicators for diabetes are up. You need to get on some medications or have some surgery immediately. So that person said, well, let me just wait. I feel fine. I don't have any symptoms. I'm not going to do anything. Now we can ask ourselves, well, what's going on here? What is the point that I'm trying to make? Why did I mention the peak of liver season and these different symptoms? And how does that relate to cycles? So let's let that kind of just turn over a little bit. And really what we're saying is the peak of liver season is the peak of a certain energetic state. So it's the peak of the liver energy. So maybe it's up here at the top of the liver energy, and then boom, the liver energy starts to maybe go down, but then the lung energy starts to come up, because that's how the cyclical nature of the 5 elements works. And they all sort of go up and down and sort of are interbalancing, intermingling with each other all the time. So going back to the example, this person again went back in a couple months after the peak of liver season. All of a sudden, everything was normal. All their markers were normal. Doctors were like, I don't understand what happened. What did you do? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you change your life? No. And they're like, no, I just did the same thing. No big deal. And everyone was confused. No one knew what happened. Well, from the outside, we can see, well, they were just involved in a cycle. And they took some tests which gave a snapshot or a picture of that specific moment in time at the peak of that cycle, which means the liver was at the peak of its sort of expansion or growth phase, which would indicate that perhaps it was beating up on some other organs. Perhaps it was sucking energy away from the spleen. Perhaps it was sending up too much wood to the heart and creating the heart to maybe be a little bit excessive energetically, maybe elevate things a little bit more, heart rate, blood pressure, and elevate cholesterol levels and these indicators and markers a little bit more than maybe they, quote, should have been. And that really draws into question is, how do we establish real baselines? Because, let's say this person took these same tests every day for 365 days. I can almost guarantee that they're going to look something like this, most likely. Because the functions of their organs are going up, they're going down, they're going up, they're going down. And really, it's probably important to point out here that it's not as drastic as this looks like, meaning your organs aren't super weak at certain times. Because if that were the case, you would probably die. Is there more looking at the 5-element understanding, the energetic understanding, and really how that harmonizes with nature? Because our organs are in contact with nature, and the same elements are true across the board. So what we mean by that is spring is associated with the wood element or the liver. What is spring all about? Spring is about things bursting up through the ground and growing and expanding at a fast rate. Spring is about things that were dead coming back to life and expanding. Likewise, it's looking at the wood element, which is about trees. Trees are all about growing and growing and growing and growing until they die. They're about spreading their roots out as much as they can and grabbing the earth and grabbing and pulling in as much nutrition as they possibly can. Well, coincidentally, the liver does the same thing. The liver is the only organ in the body that if you cut part of it out, it'll just grow back. Cut part of it out, it'll just grow back. So some of the same energetic principles that are true in nature and in the natural world as it pertains to the wood element and the liver element and the season of spring are true in our body, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So then it would make sense that you have certain tests done at the peak of liver season. Perhaps you have already a constitution or a condition of a little bit of liver excess, then it makes sense that these things would show up. Perhaps you have weakness in another organ, that then it takes the scale that should be like this and sort of tips it like this or like that, and all of a sudden, boom. But then you go take it, the same test again a couple minutes or a couple weeks or months later, and all of a sudden, maybe it's shifted in a different way, or maybe it's just evened back out because the energetics of the natural world are then different. Because we're understanding the cycles. We're understanding the cycles of nature, the cycles of nature that are at play inside of our body, and how there's so many different cycles layered and embedded within each other that it can become quite complex. And it becomes quite simple when we understand that all really comes back to this understanding of positive and negative expansion and contraction and the duality that we're embedded within. And going back to our metaphor of music and looking at the scale and realizing, well, if I'm here on the scale, then maybe this note doesn't work, but this note works really well in relation to everything else. So it really gives us a tool for contextuality, for relativity, and most importantly, adaptation. Because the nature of life, as we can see, is movement. Because this yin-yang symbol is not really fixed. In its real way, it should be spinning. But we can't really draw that on this board. But really, that's what people don't always realize, is it's moving, it's spinning all the time, because it's illustrating this process. So this process is happening on all of these levels. Personal levels, meaning in our personality, spiritually, in our evolution on this planet, sexually, in some days we feel really, fertile and horny and charged up. Other days, really don't care less. Some days we really just want to get down. Other days, don't even want to think about it. And then same thing with emotionally. Some days we're really emotionally volatile, or we're sensitive, or we're angry, or depressed, or we're sad, or we're happy. Other days we're just even. Same thing is true on the planet. The planet's going through cycles. It's growing, it's changing, it's constantly moving. There's constantly volcanoes emitting whatever they emit, new lava, new earth. It's constantly things being destroyed. There's glaciers melting, there's glaciers freezing, there's species becoming extinct, there's new species being discovered, there's people dying, there's people being born. All this is happening at the same time. We are inhaling, we are exhaling. We're taking in food, we're excreting waste. It's all happening all the time. Same thing on a cosmic level, which then it gets a little bit harder to perceive because we're really stuck here and now on the planet. But really, the solar system's moving, and solar systems around solar systems are moving, and galaxies are moving. The whole universe is moving. And it's all about this movement and this flow, and really this cyclical nature of expansion and contraction. So how can we sort of package it together in a zip file that makes sense and we can sort of carry with us in a really simple, easy way? Well, we can understand this quote from Taoism, which Taoism really at its core isn't Taoism, has nothing to do with Taoism, has nothing to do with being religious or being spiritual or being Chinese or anything at all like that. Really what it was more so about is people just sitting around in nature, observing what's happening, learning how to harmonize with nature, not caring about organizations or being this or being that, but really just being a natural human being. So as far as cycles go, as far as energetics go, as far as rhythms and pulsations go, they say that humans follow Earth, Earth follows heaven, heaven follows Tao. Now heaven, we don't mean Jesus and God and the pearly gates and monotheism and all that stuff. What we mean is really heaven as in the world above us, the cosmos, the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, all these things. And Earth is obviously Earth. Because in reality, heaven and earth are connected. And if you just imagine really quickly that you're already in space, because you are. Because there's no separation between outer space and the earth. Because if you go out into the middle of a field, it's empty all around you. Well, what is it empty with? It's not empty at all. It's actually full of space. Space all around you, space all above you. So if you imagine you're looking up, and you give space substance and color and texture, and then you look down and you say, wow, I'm already in space. I'm already immersed in space, but I happen to be standing on this planet, which this planet is moving at however many thousand miles per hour through space and moving and cycling all the time. But like many of these other cycles, we don't perceive it. We don't sit here and feel the earth moving or spinning. We think it's still. We think it's just sitting here. But that's not the reality of the situation. And that is a great example to illustrate kind of the futility of the mind in how it relates to perceiving a lot of these different things. So that's really why working with a body is more important, because you don't have to know anything about music. You don't need to study or be conditioned to know if someone plays you, like just say a minor third interval on the piano, you think, doesn't sound so good, and they play perhaps another more harmonious interval, major seventh, major third, major second, whatever. Say, oh yeah, it sounds a little better, it sounds a little happier, whatever. Because it's from the body. The body registers, the body is aware, the body's connected to nature, and it knows these things. So we see humans follow earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows Tao. Well, Tao is really that thing which can't be put into words. And the first line of the Tao Te Ching says, the way that can be weighed is not the eternal way, or the Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. So we can't really talk about the Tao too much and really what all of this means. But really more of our focus here is just having a convenient zip file, convenient organizational principle to sort of put all of the stuff, because we've been really big. We started with the microcosm, then we went out to the macrocosm. It's all this sort of stuff. We can just bring it back down to something that's really simple and really easy. And if we want to zoom in, we can zoom in, or we can also zoom out. Because we can use our mind kind of like a magnifying glass or a telescopic lens or a focused lens. We can zoom really in if we want, and zoom really out if we want. But really having a nice little package, nice little framework, really helps us to be able to do that. For example, we can say, oh, well, humans, okay, emotional, sexual, spiritual, personal. Oh, then we go back to all this framework, work our way back all the way to the pulsation and the rhythm of the organs. Likewise, we say, oh, earth, boom, we look at history, we can look at all these different things that we can measure, we can look at these different rates, we can measure the resonance of the earth, the frequency of the earth, the temperature of the earth, the pressure, all these different things we can look at and see the cyclical nature of it. And it gets obviously a little trickier when we look at heaven and Tao, but obviously we have some means for measuring different things, in stars, and I guess that's where astrology and astronomy and these different things come into play. And as far as measuring the Tao, good luck. If you can measure the Tao, then let me know, and we'll talk. But really, that's kind of where the I Ching comes in. On a serious note, that's really what the I Ching is helping us to do. When we consult the I Ching, we look with the I Ching, it's helping us tune into where we are, like what cycle we are embedded within all of these different things. Because it's kind of like, the guidebook, where we were saying earlier, when we're like Neo, we can see in the Matrix, we can see the code. Well, having the I Ching and consulting it kind of gives us a way to decode it a little bit and see, okay, well, here's where we are, here's a little bit of what that means, here's kind of how it indicates what's before, what's after, and what the real energetic dynamic process is. Because really at the end of the day, all this stuff is just symbols. And when we're quiet, when we're empty, when we're focused, and we're just aware and present, this stuff doesn't matter, because we really want to taste the thing. We want to eat the meal, not the menu. We want to drink the water, not the H2O or the word symbol for water, because that's the very thing that gives us nourishment. So really how we can do that is, just tune into the body, use the body awareness, because it's responding to all of those things. Meaning, even though you may have your entire life never known anything about the five elements, never known anything about, well, summer is associated with the heart, autumn and fall is associated with the lungs, winter is associated with the kidneys, and spring is associated with the liver, and on and on and on. Even though you never knew that, basically, it's always been affecting the body. The body's always been responding and always been fluctuating and moving according to those rhythms, according to those cycles. So it's just like in the same way as we don't necessarily feel that the earth is moving, we don't notice it, we're not aware of it, but it is. It's moving really, really fast and covering a lot of ground all the time, but we're just not aware of it. We don't perceive it because that's not really what our focus is and what we're trained to do. But the more we can become aware of these sort of cycles, we can know kind of where we are interpersonally, make better decisions, be more informed, know someday as well, it's just kind of where I'm at, it's kind of what my body feels and what it naturally wants to do, so I'm just going to harmonize with that, rather than getting so caught up in our mind thinking I have to do this, have to do that, I have to make this happen, have to do this, I have to work out, and have all these constraints and pressures put on ourselves. Maybe it's not really appropriate. There's a time for expansion, time for contraction, time for harvest, a time for planting. And it's all based on the cyclical nature of the world and of the reality that we live in.